Excellent. So you may have just seen that this session is recorded, um, and what we do is we stick these sessions on YouTube after a day or so. Morning, Danny. Familiar face. So yeah, we stick these sessions on YouTube afterwards. I will tell you about last month's one, which is particularly relevant. I'll tell you about that in a minute and give you a link for that. But just so you're aware that this session is recorded. So if it's something you want to kind of revisit at some point, or there was something I said, you're like, oh, what was that thing that Tom said? Then you can obviously scroll through the YouTube video later on, or maybe you want to show a colleague there was a particular interesting point. Excellent. So let's make a start. Let me find my slides. Here we go. So the session today, 5 ways to use positive psychology to measure and improve well-being at work. So this is a real kind of hot button issue at the minute, and I think I'll explain in a little bit what we mean by positive psychology, and we are looking at like 5 separate aspects, which hopefully might spark some ideas for you. This particular webinar, I think we're looking at, would be done before 12, hopefully, as long as I'm not rabbling on too much, because when I start talking about positive psychology, I can sort of get myself into a situation where I talk too much. But hopefully we're going to be finishing, maybe about 11:45, the opportunity to ask a few questions and maybe just get a bit of feedback from you, which ideas you might kind of take away and do something with. Okay. I've got Amy's going to be letting some people in. Excellent. Okay, so this particular webinar does come off the back of last month's webinar. So last month we did a webinar. It was reasonably well attended. 10 ways to increase well-being, reduce turnover, and attract talent. So there was a lot of positive psychology in that, and this one really is taking a few of those ideas, revisiting them, maybe looking at them in a little bit more depth. So we have a link there, which I think has been put in the chat function. So if you want to, listen to that on your way into work, or I don't know if you want to listen to it in your lunch break, probably be a good idea just to have your lunch break. But there might be some things in there, and again, there are 10 specific things. And if you can just take a couple of things away, then excellent. That's the kind of point of these webinars. So anyway, let's get into today. Let me tell you a little bit about myself and Changing Minds Kent. So Changing Minds Kent is a CIC, which means we're a non-profit organisation, and essentially we do 2 things. One aspect is we apply for kind of grant money, and we do work in the community. So we work with schools and various other kind of organizations to do kind of like more like charitable work in the community. So that we do that on one side, community wellbeing projects. The other thing we do is we do work with other businesses. So just a photo there of some of my colleagues up in London doing some training in central London. So we do work with a number of businesses, and we do have a little bit of capacity at the minute to be doing some more work with businesses that are interested in working with us as a non-profit organisation on well-being and staff well-being. Just to give you a little bit about me, so I'm married with kids. My girls are just doing their GCSEs at the minute. I work in health and social care and have done for 20 years, and particularly in mental health. So I've worked managing and developing kind of mental health services in the community. And then the last 5 years or so, I've sort of kind of branched out to do more kind of coaching and training. So I'm a mental health first aid instructor. So I do training to train up mental health first aiders. I might tell you a little bit about that later on if you haven't heard of that. I also work as a coach, a wellbeing coach, training to become a psychotherapist, and I have a real interest in positive psychology. I'm just finishing a master's degree at the University East London on positive psychology, and I'm particularly interested in my kind of area of research. I'm looking at employee well-being and its link to retention and turnover. There has been a big increase in turnover within organisations, and what I'm really interested in, particularly in with carers and support workers, what's the link between well-being and turnover? Are there certain aspects of well-being that lead to people staying or going? So I'm conducting that research at the minute, and this summer I'll be hopefully, depending on the results. So, that might be sort of interesting to see what the link is between that. I think we all have this kind of idea that well-being does play a role in people staying or leaving in their jobs, but it'd be nice to sort of dig into that a little bit more, like what aspects of well-being lead to people either wanting to leave or wanting to stay with an organization. Because I think from an organization perspective, especially if any of you kind of work in HR, you will know that people are increasingly going to be important. Keeping good people and keeping them well is very closely linked with the organization doing well. So that's what I'm interested in by way of kind of research. If you want to talk to me and find out a little bit more about that, then feel free we can chat afterwards, or maybe we can schedule a Zoom, tea, coffee, what have you. So anyway, that's Change Your Minds, Kent, and that's the type of work that we do. So let's get into it a little bit more. What I'd like to do, I think, before we actually start, if you have a little look on Zoom here, we've got a chat function, and maybe using the chat function, I'd be really interested in just to get a little bit of a sense of like who's here today, where in the world are you from, and what do you do? So, and that might link to why it is that you're here today. Maybe you work in HR, maybe you just got an interest in positive psychology. Maybe you're a coach. It doesn't really matter. I just sort of like to get a sense of like who's in the room. This is the thing about Zoom is I think like, if I was doing like a physical presentation, I'll be able to see, individuals. I'll be able to say hello to a few people, find out what it is that they do for work. So if you can use the chat function, where in the world are you from, and what do you do? Let's see if I can find the chat function. Where is the chat function? Just cut that for a second. There it is. Chat function. Okay. Might just read a few of these out. So Parky, India, welcome. So you're studying a master's in organizational psychology. Yes, there might be some interesting, a few interesting ideas in today's talk. Connie in London, staff wellbeing specialist, excellent, welcome. We've got Philip, India, school psychologist, planning to move into corporate LD role, excellent. Dover, big local. I assume that's Dover in Kent, just down the road from me. So welcome to you, Linda. Who else do we have here? Emily, North Wales. Work in marketing, run a wellbeing support website with a mindfulness focus. Huge passion for wellbeing. Well, excellent. Good for you. I love a bit of mindfulness. I'm really interested in the research, mindfulness. I really do sort of feel mindfulness will become like people go to the gym. It will become an everyday thing that people do. Danny, excellent. Nice to see you again. We've done some work previous, and I didn't realise you lived in Ramsgate, just down the road from me. Excellent. Karen, independent social worker. So you're an AMP. Do some very important work. Bless you. Really interesting positive psychology. Yeah, excellent. So maybe there might be hopefully some ideas here today, Karen, that might be of help for you. Head of business transformation, Louise in Maidstone. Welcome to you. interested in cultural behavioural change. Yeah, so there might be a few little ideas here today that might just spring some ideas for you. But Chumi is in currently in Spain, masters in social psychology, trainee psychotherapist. Yeah, like me. Yeah, welcome. Who else we got here? Grail. I hope that's right. You're in the Philippines. Want learn from positive psychology, a refresh. Yeah, well, there is so much in positive psychology, Grail, but so there's just a few things that we're going to be doing today. It's nice to have people from all over the world, and certainly on my degree course, it's a very kind of multicultural and kind of degree course with students from all over the world. And there is a real interest in this. Excellent. So let's move on. Let's have a little look. Am I still sharing? Probably am. Here we go. Okay. So how common are mental health problems? So this is a study from Public Health England. So I know we're kind of focusing in on England, and there'll be different perspectives depending on where you are in the world. But I thought this was really interesting because it says in this study, and this is before COVID, more than 8 in 10 people have experienced early signs of poor mental health, including feeling anxious, stressed, low mood, trouble sleeping, and that they've experienced those things in the last 12 months. So that's really interesting to me, because what that's saying is that this is a common experience. This is a common experience for all of us. Common mental health problems. So we're not talking about severe mental health problems, but we're talking about mental health problems that will impact the vast majority of the people you work with. So this is a current issue, and I don't imagine that it will be massively different in other parts of the world. There might be varying different things going on slightly, but I don't imagine the picture is massively different. Here's a few more kind of stats for you. 35% of employees say that stress is having a negative impact on their work. 24%, so a quarter of employees, when measured for depression, had clinically relevant symptoms. So not to say that they were being diagnosed, but they possibly could be if they went to the doctor. That's a lot of people. And again, if you're kind of working in an organizational setting, we need to be aware that we're talking about a lot of people that this is happening to. 58% of employees have elevated symptoms of anxiety, so when measured using the GAD-7 General Anxiety Disorder Scale 7-question score. That's a lot of people worried, a lot of people depressed. So this is the context in which we're working, and I don't think this is, from my personal opinion, that this is massively improving. Cost of living crisis is only adding to people's depression and anxiety. So anyway, this is what we're contending with. So I want to kind of move on. This is our first kind of point, and we're talking about measuring well-being, and this is something which is of interest to people who are interested in positive psychology. What is positive psychology? Well, probably Martin Seligman probably said it the best, that positive psychology, for many years, psychology did have a bit of a focus on what was wrong with you. It was looking at disorder, and it was kind of categorizing that. So positive psychology doesn't look at what's wrong with you. Positive psychology looks at what's right with you. I mean, it's really interesting because it sort of starts to change the perspective. And there's lots of good things that come off the back of looking at what's right with you. So what we're talking about, we're talking about well-being, we're talking about resilience, we're talking about values, we're talking about like post-traumatic growth. We're talking about all the kind of good things that lead to reporting higher levels of life satisfaction. And from a scientific point of view, I suppose what we're doing is we're looking at the people that are most happiest, people that are most resilient, and we're asking the question, what are you doing that the rest of us aren't, and can we copy it? What's going on in your head? What's going on in your life that leads you experience what you experience, and can we kind of formulate things off the back of that in order to kind of spread well-being on an individual level and also on an organizational level as well. Now, some of the criticism of positive psychology is kind of interesting. There has been a bit of criticism with regards to this kind of idea that everything's fantastic, everything's fine, turn that frown upside down, and there has been this kind of idea of toxic positivity kind of leveled at positive psychology. And so it has adapted over the years and it's needed to, because otherwise, maybe you're deluding yourself by saying everything's fine and positive, but actually it's not. And it's really important that we actually acknowledge what's wrong with us, and we need to acknowledge what's wrong in the world, so to speak, in order for things to improve. So what I would say is positive psychology is trying to focus reasonably well on what's right rather than what's wrong, but we're not ignoring what's wrong. We don't want to delude ourselves. So that's positive psychology. It's a really interesting branch of psychology that's really kind of exploded in the last 10, 15 years and really kind of got going in the 90s, and by kind of 2000, it was kind of started to be established as a branch of psychology. So one of the well-being models that I love for its positivity is PERMA. Now, PERMA is a well-being model, but it's also a measurement tool. What does PERMA stand for? Well, PERMA stands for the P's for positive emotion. So that's kind of the physical sensation of feeling good, feeling joy, feeling connected. It's those kind of nice physical sensations that we experience. And obviously, the more of those experiences you have, the more likely you're going to say that you're happy, or that you have good well-being. Engagement. This is a really interesting idea. It's the idea of flow and having flow experiences. So the research shows, more people than not have flow experiences. About 80% of people regularly have flow experience. What is a flow experience? Well, when you're in the flow, you're really engaged in something. Maybe describe it this way. If you've ever seen a really good film and you've been totally absorbed in the story, maybe in a book, it particularly happens when we're also kind of doing some sort of skill, where we're displaying some sort of like mastery over some skill. So it might include music or sport, and we have this kind of flow experience. But what the research shows is that the more we have these flow experiences in our life, where we're really absorbed in a particular task, and especially one where it requires a bit of skill, and we're right on the edge between success and failure, the more of those types of experiences we have in life, again, we're more likely to report high levels of well-being. Relationship, that's an obvious one, I sort of think, for well-being. It's really important that we have good quality supportive relationships in our lives. Meaning, feeling that what you do actually has some real worth to the world. Feeling meaning and purpose is closely associated with good well-being. And finally, accomplishment. Accomplishment, I like to say, it's like feeling the wind in your hair, sort of feeling like you're going from here to there in life, that you've accomplished something, you've created some value in some way. So that's PERMA. So that's a model, and great model, sort of developed by Martin Seligman, 2011. In 2016, Kern & Butler developed that into an actual measurement tool with a number of questions, and you'll be able to do those questions, and it would give you a score for well-being. And what's really interesting, that obviously this is positive psychology, so we're looking at what's right. It's like, how much positive emotion do you have? How good are your relationships? And so it's looking at well-being from a positive perspective. Now, I always really liked using Kern & Butler's well-being tool, and you'll find that online. But the one that I'm particularly interested in is one that's sort of been developed by Donaldson & Donaldson just during the pandemic. And they added 4 further sort of like pillars, if you like. Imagine your well-being is like a house, and you've got all these pillars. And you want as many strong pillars as possible. Well, we've got 5 already in PERMA, but they've added another 4, and they've also kind of looked at it more from a workplace perspective. And so they developed a model and also a measurement tool for measuring well-being in a work setting. And they added mindset. So this is like, to what degree do you feel hopeful about work? You know, that actually things are going to improve in your organization. That's really important, that we sort of feel like there's, you know, if things are bad, that they are getting better. Physical health is a big one. It's very hard to feel good well-being if we don't like physically have good well-being. The environment that you work in, so you know, if you're working in a damp basement, less likely you're going to feel good. You know, do you have access to green spaces? And finally, financial, that you sort of, you know, you're not spending a lot of time worrying about your financial situation. That can be a real kind of detriment to your well-being. So great kind of well-being concept. Here it is. Here's the 9. So positive emotion, engagement, relationship, meaning, accomplishment, physical health, mindset, environment, and financial. Now, I was really interested actually in giving all of you guys an opportunity to actually do a well-being survey, see where your well-being is at. So I think what we're going to do is give you guys the opportunity to do that now for 5 minutes. Here is the, I might just put this in the chat function. Amy's already done it. Excellent. So in the chat function, you'll see a link, which is wellatwork.scoreapp.com. And you'll be able to take the survey, and actually at the end of the survey, it will score you in those 10 areas for workplace well-being. When you click on take the survey, I might just see if I can show you what it looks like. So it looks like this. When you click on take the survey, it does ask for an email. I don't really mind whether you know, if you want to get your email, if you want to get your results emailed to you afterwards, then this is where it would come from. If you don't want to give us your email address and just put a random email address in there, that's absolutely fine. If you're concerned, I mean, having said that, it's only me and my colleague Colin that would actually see that email address, and we don't really have any particular use for it, but the system will email you a copy of your results. So I just want to give people maybe until past to have a go at that and just experience measuring, using this tool, measuring your well-being. Again, you can just make up you can just make up answers to the questions if you don't want to be, you know, if you just want to just kind of try it out, or maybe, you know, if you're in a good place, you don't mind actually seeing what your well-being looks like and how these 10 areas lead to workplace well-being. So let's just give you guys a few minutes to do that, and then we'll carry on our presentation at past. Is that okay with everyone? It's hard to know with anyone with black boxes.
Yeah.
All right, Danny. Yes, great. I'm glad I'm not talking to myself. So give that a go for a few minutes, and then I'll cut back in at past. Okay, so it's past. If you haven't finished, maybe finish another time or carry on doing that while I'm talking. That's up to you. But I just wanted to give you an experience of what that would look like. We've used that tool with organizations. We put it on an iPad and we can kind of put it into a space where people can measure their well-being. And I think it's really important to be able to measure well-being, because if you're going to do some work on well-being, you want to know what impact you're actually having. And I really like this as a way of measuring the impact of any kind of projects that you might be running in an organization. Okay, so that's measuring well-being. That's a really interesting idea. Let's move on because we're running out of time. Let's have a look at this next idea. This is an idea I really like. It's called appreciative inquiry. And essentially, this is an approach that you can have to an organization where we're looking at what's right rather than what's wrong. So when we make inquiry, we're looking at what can we appreciate, what's right about this. So this is David Cooper Ryder, 1980s. He was really interested in, you know, adult organizations solve problems. All organizations have problems. How do we go about solving it? Well, in the 20th century, business, certainly kind of very kind of American view of business, was that businesses and organizations are machines. And that if something's not working, like a car, you would just replace that part. So, if there was the wheel wasn't working, well, let's get a new wheel on there, and that would fix the problem. Turns out that in some organizations, they just replace the wheel again and again and again. They realize the problem isn't the wheel, the problem's somewhere else in the system. And I certainly believe, and I think David Cooperide would as well, that human systems and organization aren't machines. That we are a really complex group of people with a plethora of strengths and qualities, and that positive change comes from a positive mindset. That is, looking deliberately at what's right leads you down that path. So it's a really curious thing, because organizations at their base, when you kind of go down to the lowest level, we're talking about the individual, and the individual is affected by placebo. Just believing something good will happen can actually make something good happen. So we are really kind of at the edge of science here when we're trying to work out what's going on. So as an example of placebo, you may have heard of things like this. 30 to 60% of patients on a placebo, so they've been given nothing but a sugar pill, actually show improvement. They believe that this pill is going to help them, and it actually does. Patients with positive thoughts recover more quickly from surgery. Teachers with view of a student, a positive view or a negative view, seem to impact their results. So this kind of idea of appreciative inquiry, from a consultancy, well-being perspective, it has been used as a model for change. There's a paper where it's been used in a school setting in the UK. So we have a failing school, and someone comes in, and what would usually happen, and I've seen this myself because I've been a teacher. Someone comes in, they change everything, they try and replicate what's working elsewhere, and it doesn't always work. And maybe I might give you an analogy, like a garden. Imagine you've got a garden, and you've got all different types of soil types, you've got all different kind of species in there, and someone comes in and just flattens the whole thing, puts weed killer down, and then tries to put their own plants in. It doesn't always work. Actually, what we need is an appreciative inquiry is non-prescriptive. So what we do is we look at what's working, and we try and protect that, and we build on that and grow on that. Rather than destroying all the things that we think are wrong, we actually take a positive view of an organization, and we look at, what ideas have we got actually already here, what's already working well, and how can we build on that? And that approach is really quite powerful in developing positive change in organizations. So how do we use appreciative inquiry? So this is a model. It's called the 5D process because you've got 5 Ds there, essentially. So you're defining, what do we want to do as an organization? And then look, point 2 is straight into what's our strength? What are we good at? And how can we use what we're good at in order to get what we want as an organization? And then there's an element of dreaming, like really thinking, like creating new ideas. It's a very kind of creative process. How can we, envisage the very best that our organization can be? And then we start to infer, how do we design? How do we actually get there? And how do we deploy? How do we actually make that happen? So it's really interesting kind of way of looking at problems, looking at what's right and how we can actually get there rather than try to strip out what's wrong. So I just as a very basic example of this, just kind of this kind of idea that words create worlds. Words create worlds. So this is, we're taking a socially constructive perspective here, like we can construct a reality in our minds and then it becomes reality in the real world. So maybe I'll ask you this. If I was to ask you this question, what's happened this week? Just notice, what you would say if I was having a conversation with you, face-to-face, one-to-one. I said, what's happened to you this week? Just see what things pop into your head. Now, compare that with this question. What's the best thing that's happened to you this week? What's made you smile this week? can you see that the question can take you in a very different direction? And that's what we're looking to do, on an organizational level. It's asking the right questions that will take us in the right direction. So I like this idea of words create worlds, this social constructionist sort of view of reality. It's very similar to CBT. If we've got a few therapists here. It's change the way you think, change the way that you act. If we can dream a better world, then we're more likely to be able to make that happen. A self-fulfilling prophecy. So that's using appreciative inquiry. That's a very quick overview. Honestly, you can become an expert in appreciative inquiry as a consultant and have that as your whole basis of interacting with people. I just wanted to put it on your map as an idea. Maybe that's of interest to you. You might be able to use this AI process if you're in an executive position with your staff. You can get them in and go through this as a process. It's a nice framework. Okay, so let's move on. Values. So this is one of the other things that positive psychology looks at. Looks at values. What do you value, and how can you align values? So each individual has a set of values, and then they all kind of culminate within an organization. If you have lots of people with different values, what you tend to find is that people's values get crossed, and as they get crossed, relationship problems start to breed. People see the world in different ways. So it's really important, I think, from an organization perspective, to make sure that if we can align values as much as possible, not to say they're exactly the same, because that's never going to happen, but if we can align them to some degree with the organization and staff within themselves, that life and work is more smooth, there's less disruption. So just as an example, what are your values? What are your values? What are the values of your employees or colleagues? And if you're completely stumped, well, I don't know, what do we mean by values? But here's a list. I think I might just throw this on the chat function so that you can see this. It's a really handy PDF that I use. So have a little look at that. Let me get my slides back up. So we've got a nice list of values there. I'm not sure if you can quite see them because that's not very good quality, but there's a nice long list there. And normally what I would do, working with an individual, is I'd ask them to go through that and look at that. Can they pick out their top 5 and can they put them in order? And let's see, can I go back now? Hang on. Let's go back to here. And so what the research shows is that if you can introduce something called values-based recruitment, that's associated with a reduction in staff turnover because there's less disruption in relationships and people feel like they're working along individuals who see the world in a similar way to them, that they have the similar kind of values. So this is something that we just instigated into an organization where, as part of the recruitment process, we'll actually give the applicant this list of values, and we'll ask them to, which 5 would you pick, and then we ask them why is that of value to you, so we know that it's genuine, and we then compare that with the values which we've done a survey with the existing employee group. We've asked them, what are your values? And so we end up with a hierarchy of what are the staff's top 5 values on average, and how closely do they link with this new person who wants to join the organization? So we call this values-based recruitment. To what degree does the individual share the values of the group that they're coming to work in? If they're wildly different, don't expect that everyone's going to be getting on. Don't expect that there's not going to be problems. So this is a bit of research that's been done in health and social care, and they've seen a reduction in staff turnover from doing that. So yeah, it's really worth thinking about, the values within an organization. What are the values of your employees? Can you ask them? That's a bit of work possibly that you can do. And how aligned are they? Do people that seem to have regular issue with each other, do they just have very different values? in the future, could you employ people and promote people that actually have more kind of similar values to the organization? What would that look like? Excellent. Starting to run out a bit of time, so let's move on. A few of you are coaches, so here's just a few kind of ideas. I like coaching models because they're like a framework, and they're like a map. So when you're looking at change, and certainly, you know, if you're looking at how can you improve well-being, well, we're talking about an organization change process here. So I just want to throw a few kind of ideas out to you, if you're sort of thinking about how do we create that change, because it's very complicated. Here's Kotter's 8-step change model, a bit of an older model, and there's kind of like 8 steps there, that kind of give you like a bit of a map, a bit of a framework about how it is you might kind of develop these changes. One of the criticisms of this, I would sort of say, when you kind of look at this model, you sort of see that creating a core coalition, you know, of like executives or managers, developing a strategy, and then 4, sharing the strategy. So this is a bit of a top-down kind of way of kind of changing, you know, trying to improve well-being. There is an assumption here that ideas can't come from the bottom up. So this is a bit of an older kind of view about change. But there's a nice little kind of process that you can kind of go through there. So that's okay. I quite like this one, actually. So this is the ADKAR model of change, a little newer. So this is really interesting. It says, let me just read you this. When organizations change, it's suggested that it's the behaviors of individuals that have actually changed. It's their behaviors that have changed. So, because an organization is at roots, is it not just a group of people, and that those people actually are, you know, it have all these different kind of behaviors. If we can change the behaviors of individuals at that local level, then we will expect to see changes in the organization. So it's a different kind of perspective here. And this ADKAR model developed by Jeffrey Hyatt has the individual's behavior at the heart of the model. So what does it stand for? Awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and then reinforcement. So thinking about like well-being change, first thing that needs to happen is awareness. People in the organization need to know like what's going on with well-being and where are we actually at. We need to have an accurate picture of well-being, and maybe measuring well-being would be a start of that. Then we have to create a desire. Without desire, nothing's going to change. Like, why do we need to change? Why would improving well-being actually be a good thing for the organization? And then you're going to need knowledge, because it's all well and good being aware of the need, having a desire to change, but if you don't know how to do it, you're not going to get anywhere. So now you need to give people tools and ideas. And if you give people those 3 things, then they start to do it naturally. Like the 4th one just naturally follows on from the first 3. And then we look at how do we reinforce these behaviors so that this is a continuing cycle. It's not just a flash in the pan. So I really like that as a model, because you know, I do believe that we need to change behaviors in order to change organizations. So that's a nice little kind of structure, something to sort of a map, as it were, to sort of go, how do we go from where we are to where we want to go? Finally, again, these are common if you're a coach. Nearly everyone knows Whitmore, the GROW model. If you're a manager, I quite like this as a manager. If you're working on a one-to-one, you might use this GROW model. So GROW stands for goal. So it's asking people, you know, what do you want from this? R, what's the reality? O, what are the options? And then will, you know, who's actually going to do what? So that's the GROW model. But actually, which is really interesting, it has been developed into a group model. Very similar to GROW, but you'll see there's an O in there. Sorry, a U in there, understanding others. So it's really important to actually understand everyone's perspective. So we're going to be looking at change. I think it's really important that organizations look at what does that change look like from lots of different directions, and everyone understand the need to maybe improve well-being as an organization. So just a few kind of coaching models there that I like and that I use in the work that we do at Changing Minds Kent. Just wanted to give you like a little look under the bonnet, as it were, just some of the ideas. Finally, we did say this kind of idea about training. How do we give people knowledge? How do we you know, because this is part of the process. After we've developed an awareness and a desire to change, how do we give people the tools? So one of the things that we do a fair bit work with organisations, mental health first aid. And mental health first aid, individuals, you know, within organisations, they will be trained up. Doesn't mean that they're counsellors. It doesn't mean that they're doctors, but they are able to just check in with their colleagues, to be able to signpost them into support. And it really is starting to change the behaviours and the conversations within an organisation. Starts to change the culture, the acceptance of mental health problems, and some skills and knowledge about what to actually do. So this is a great program. I sort of say that this is a good place for organizations to start. It comes in a number of flavors, a 2-day version, a 1-day version, a half-day version. There's a number of things that, you know, that it would kind of cover. And we have seen real good improvement. It's a good place to start with organizations because it increases awareness, increases confidence in individuals of having conversations with individuals who look like they need a bit of support. So that's a great place to start. Some of the other workshops that we do, a number of workshops, and obviously it's not just us to do these things, but you will find these things out there in the marketplace. Some of the ones I particularly like, I like managing stress as a workshop, fostering deeper connections, you know, listening skills, how to build well-being in teams and organizations. That's something called psychological capital. You know, capital's like money, isn't it? But it's like psychological capital. As an organization, if the mental health of your staff was a bank balance, would you be rich or would you be bankrupt? So that's a really interesting idea by Dr. Lutherans. You know, we can actually measure psychological capital, and actually there's good evidence of showing that we can actually improve psychological capital through these types of workshops. So loads of kind of ideas out there. These are kind of courses that we run with organizations. And here's another little idea that we've been doing this year, which has gone down really well. We do these kind of well-being pods. So you imagine like a couple of well-being coaches, and we kind of rock up to a place of work. We have a well-being pod, and we invite people down. It's a lot more informal. We have like one-to-one discussions. We take blood pressure. We talk about people's stress, and we allow people to sort of talk about what's going on for them. And then we do some signposting if necessary. And we get people to do that, like a well-being survey, a little bit like what you would have done earlier. And we use that as a tool to develop, you know, personal well-being plans with people. So this is a great, it's much more kind of informal, and staff really sort of appreciate that. So not bad. We're kind of just coming up to the end now. It's 10 to 12. Just a few other little bits and pieces. We've got a newsletter there. If you want to subscribe to that, there's always links to these videos and any kind of resources that kind of go along with these webinars. There's all manner of different bits and pieces that we kind of send out. Here on the right here, we've got just a reminder of just, you know, if you're interested in just sampling, you know, maybe just as an individual, you want to go on the 1-day version or the 2-day mental health first aid. I don't know if we've got any spaces left on the 2-day. There might be 1 or 2 left. I'm not sure. There's a youth version there as well. So if you're interested in mental health first aid, you know, maybe just like piloting that or just giving that a go as an individual, then feel free to kind of contact us and get yourself on that. Okay, so there we go. I think today was just kind of giving people you know, a whole bunch of ideas. Hopefully, you know, there's something there that that kind of resonated with you. Out of interest, I think what I'd like to do, maybe just in the chat function again, you can put your kind of questions in there. I'll answer them at the end. But can I just ask you, out of all the different ideas that have been presented over the last 45 minutes, which of you liked the best? Which has resonated with you? Was there one idea? Just sort of interesting to get a bit of feedback. Was there one idea that you think, I'd like to look into that a little bit more, or I could see how that could be helpful? That's an idea that I'd like to, you know, kind of run with. What would you say? Yeah, so Melissa's saying the ad car model. I really like that ad car model actually. Yeah, Emily does as well. It's helpful, I think, as a framework, isn't it? And sort of kind of knowing what do we need to have in place in order to kind of get the change that we want. Um, yes, whole webinar was illuminating. Well, that's good. Hopefully, you've got some ideas. Obviously, or Linda says value-based recruitment. Yeah, that's something that we are trialing in a number of organisations. We'd like to sort of we're actually we're actually surveying the whole like employee group, asking them what values and see which ones kind of come to the top. And then we're going to use, like maybe the top 10 and see if new people are applying for a post in the organisation, how many of the 5 that they choose are in the top 10 of the existing. That's really interesting. It just gives us another perspective about whether someone's a good fit for the organisation, because we don't want to employ someone and it not work out for them and the organisation. That costs time and money. Karen says, feel the survey could be very helpful. Yeah, I like the survey. I programmed it into that link deliberately so that people can get a bit of feedback, because I think that's part of the kind of process for change. Is that it's all well and good, like measuring well-being, but people need to know where they're actually at if they're going to actually make improvements. And this is really great. And usually what happens, and if you feel free to do this again later if you haven't done it like genuinely, if you've just been randomly putting in scores, but if you do it genuinely, it's really interesting because it starts conversations, and it gets people thinking about, oh, why is that? I did this. We did the survey with someone who scored really low for relationship, and actually, when she started reflecting on things, she had, not been spending time with friends and family. She had been spending too much time at work, and it had affected her well-being. And it was only when she did the survey that she realised that, and then she sort of realised, yeah, I do need to make a bit more of an effort with this person or that person, and so change started to happen. Behavioural change started to happen because of awareness. So that's really interesting. Yes, Amy. So Toomey asked about certificates relating to the trainings we offer. Yeah, certificates, of course. The mental health first aid. This is not just a course that we run. It is a course that's run by Mental Health First Aid England, and their certificates. You gets sent out to all the individuals that complete the course. There are no tests or anything. This is just attendance certificates. So hopefully that answers your question to me. So excellent. What else have we got there? I'm just having a little look. Using the Perma Plus 4. Yeah, I like Perma Plus 4, Danny, particularly because all the questions are more work-based. The previous Perma survey was very personal. I think one of the questions in the original Perma surveys was something like, how much do you feel loved? And as a manager, I don't know how comfortable I would be asking employees that. It sort of feels like you're crossing a line a little bit. But the Perma Plus 4, this like 2020 version, the one that you've been maybe looked at doing today, they're all workplace kind of questions. So the questions have been changed up a little bit by Donaldson and Donaldson. And I sort of feel it's just a better fit for work and business. Excellent. So but one of the reasons why we offer these webinars is that we are obviously interested in, we do work with a number of organizations, and we're interested in doing work. If well-being is on your agenda at the minute and you want to have a conversation with us about what it is that we might be able to do to help, no obligation, of course. We just put this kind of information out there to kind of give people a sense of what might be possible. And just kind of give you a bit of a taster of some things. But this is the type of work that we do. So we'll kind of do this sort of kind of coaching work within organizations, develop well-being strategies. We look at bringing in training. We look at measuring well-being within a group. And, there's loads of ideas. If you want some more ideas, look at the webinar from last month. We've got 10 ideas there. And there might be some ideas in there. Feel free to take anything away. But if you want to know more about something, then get in contact. You've got my email there. or you've got our kind of contacts, then just reach out and we can have a conversation. If we can be of help, then that would be great. Yes. So Connie's saying about this kind of idea of value-based recruitment. We really need to make sure the team lives and breathes these values. I've seen too many discrepancies. She says this is what our values are, but we don't actually act accordingly. Yeah, I saw a great example of this working with an organization locally, and the top execs had this value statement, which was valuing property, not people. And if you live locally, you might know who they are. And they really believed that. I generally got the sense, the way that they kind of acted, that they really did value people. But the managers, or say not the man, some of the managers, they didn't have that value system. They valued property more than people, unfortunately. And so there was a real discrepancy within the organization, and there's conflict because of that, because people were saying one thing, but actually what was going on was something else. So it's really important, like Connie's absolutely right, that this is genuine. We can't pretend to have values. If we do, like, we're lying to ourselves, and eventually problems will occur because of it. So we need to be really honest about what our values are, and that needs to happen in organizations as well. What else do we have? Thank you so much, Tom. It's been interesting. Yeah, it's great. Nice to have you along, Emily. Feel free to make contact if you'd like to have a chat. Excellent. Are there any positions available for volunteers? Yeah, possibly. Excellent. So thank you very much, everyone. Look, it's 2 minutes to 12. I said we'll finish before 12. Yeah, so thank you for your time. Again, this webinar will be on YouTube in the coming week or so. So if you're subscribed to our mailing list, then you should get an email with a link to this webinar. If there's been anything on here that you'd like to listen to or watch again, then you're more than welcome to do that. And yeah, get in touch. If you've got any questions, get in touch. It's lovely. I'd say lovely to see you all, but you're all just black boxes. But it's lovely to sort of know that you're out there somewhere on the internet listening, and that that there are a group of people that kind of share these types of values and ideas, that we're really interested in people. That people are really valuable, and we want people to be functioning well and feeling good about themselves and the work that they do. And I think that's increasingly so important these days that happens. It's not easy, but if we can work towards it, I think that's a great thing. And obviously you guys have come along because you believe that too. So thanks very much. Yeah, drop us an email if you've got any questions, and have a good afternoon. Take care, everyone. See you later. Bye.